Hey YouTube, welcome to City Prepping. Today is January the 18th and we are on day 27 of the government shutdown. And we're now at a point in this process where people are beginning to ask the question, is this going to end in a catastrophe? Where's this all going? What's the end game on this and what is going to be the result? And for those that are looking at this situation asking, what can I do to be prepared should it go to that actual point of a catastrophe? We'll talk about that a little more at the end of the video. But I want to start off by saying, before I jump into this subject, let me say, this channel, if you're new here, I don't typically get into topical videos talking about current issues. I usually try to keep my conversations and my videos a little more broad to give people an understanding of, hey, this is how you prepare for man-made or natural disasters. And I think this definitely qualifies as a man-made disaster. I try to avoid getting into fear porn or scaring people into using tactics to become a prepper. But when I look at this situation, I don't see it being terribly different than looking at watching the news when you see a hurricane, for example, coming into Florida, and they begin to warn people, hey, you need to prepare, you need to evacuate, or you need to do whatever. There's something that's coming here in a few days, and you need to get ready. When I look at this particular situation and the way things are playing out, with everything that's happening within our current political culture of we're seeing with the Mueller investigation, Michael Cohen will be testifying before Congress on February the 7th. You're seeing a lot of things that give the what appear to me to be kind of a lot of things coming to a head. And as such, it begs a question, what will happen if this, and this plays out? Now, I know there is a big difference between what is possible and what is probable. It is possible that things could get a lot worse with this, everything, especially with the government shutdown. And I want to point out that I think there is a probability that, yes, it could get, to be honest, it could get pretty bad. Now, what does bad look like? I don't know. But I'll talk about that here a little more in a second. And having said that, there's an article that came out today that I thought was really fascinating. It was on the homepage of Drudge Report. I'll provide a link in the description section below. And I think it's worth reading a few of the excerpts from the article and kind of discussing it a little, because some of these things, they are what I would consider, again, probable scenarios that could possibly play out. If you were to look on the end of the spectrums between, a hurricane being on one end of possibilities that, yes, it's going to happen, and maybe something like an all-out nuclear war in America being on the other end of, hey, it could happen, but not very likely. I kind of see the situation of what we're seeing somewhere maybe closer to, the hurricane scenario, maybe not quite in the middle, but a little more toward that scenario where, yes, this is possible, and there is an element of probability that it could play out this way. So what I'll do is, again, I'll link to this article, and let me read a few of the excerpts. I want to slide my laptop over here. So what I'll do is I'll read a few excerpts from this article. These have some good talking points, and I'll provide a link in the description section below if you want to read the full article. So the first one talks about essentially this guy, he's doing the interview with some of these individuals, and he starts off by saying, one senior Republican Senate staffer told me he could envision the shutdown lasting until March, when federal funding dries up for food stamps, a crisis that would be hard for Washington to ignore. Not only are there going to be a lot of hungry families, he said, but there are going to be a lot of Walmarts and Safeways and Krogers that are missing revenue. I've seen a lot of other videos on YouTube talking about this, that if the food stamps dry up, obviously you're going to have, to put it mildly, you're going to have a lot of upset people. I did a video not too long ago that talks about some of the precursors and signs that show what is a tipping point in cultures where society really falls apart. And one of those is, unaffordable food prices or a lack of food. So this is something that to me gives an indicator that we should keep an eye on it. Because if we go down this path, if it really gets to that point, you'll see people rioting in the streets for obvious reasons. Let me read on here in this next part. Others warned of potential flashpoints in America's airports, where TSA agents and air traffic controllers have already been working without pay for weeks. According to the Washington Post reporter Robert Casa, some Republican lawmakers close to the White House privately conclude that the shutdown won't end until TSA employees stay home and Americans get furious about their flights. Out of all the scenarios that I think will probably play out, I could definitely see this one for sure happening, as more and more government employees just essentially don't show up. Things like the airport system. I have friends that are Border Patrol agents that, are going without pay. So if you begin to see people step back from their positions, from their jobs that you and I rely on, that's going to have a direct impact on all of us. Now, I wouldn't look at that as a catastrophe, but more of a huge inconvenience. So let me read on some of these other points, because again, you kind of step into some other potential challenges that come up. On a similar, if darker note, I spoke to one congressional staffer who wondered aloud whether it might take a stressed out air traffic controller causing a plane to crash to bring an end to the shutdown. And several aides worried that some kind of terrorist incident would end up serving as a catalyst to get the government up and running again. Needless to say, if something like this were to play out in America, I would hope that the two political sides will put their differences aside and get things up and running again. Let me read on to another point here in the article. Doug Hay, a Republican strategist who spent more than a decade working in Congress, told me he could imagine the shutdown ending if the reported lapse in inspections from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration prompted a widespread food safety scares. We saw what happened with romaine lettuce a few weeks ago, he said. You give that same kind of scare to a ranch in California, and all of a sudden, not only do everyone's beef prices go up, but there's a mass panic. As mentioned in a previous point about food stamps, one of the things that concerns me greatly is when you see food shortages happen, you get a lot of people that are obviously upset. In and of itself, that could become a huge catastrophe. Now, the things that we just ran through from this article, again, I realize these are what you would kind of consider extreme scenarios. But having said that, could these things happen? Absolutely. They could play out. I remember it was about actually I think it was about 2007 when fuel prices began to spike, and you saw the impact that it had on things like the trucking industry. You saw the impact that it then had on food. It rippled throughout the United States industry in so many ways. So something like this, if it does play out, if the government shutdown continues and neither party bends on this issue, the ramifications, the impact to our society and culture could be traumatic. So if you're coming to this video and you're asking yourself, okay, all these things could end in catastrophe, well, what do I have to do to be prepared? What can I do now? My advice is this. There's 5 simple things you can do. These are not going to break the bank, and these are things that you can actually put, store away, and things that you can actually use on a daily basis. Now, I took a training through the city a few years ago called CERT. It's a federal program, and it essentially teaches how to help your community during a time of emergency. The things that I'll mention here are the basic concepts that they list out in the course, and I think it would serve you very well, if you haven't already done so, to have these things prepared in your own home. So what I'll do is I'll list out these items in kind of a backwards order, with number 1 being the most important. I'll start on number 5. Have some basic lighting. Have flashlights, whether you get a lantern. These are all things that you can pick up on Amazon, you can pick up on, at Walmart. You don't have to break the bank. It would be a good idea to have some kind of lighting source. You ask, well, why would you need that? If there is any kind of impact to our infrastructure, lighting, electricity, you don't want to be without lighting in a particular situation where the lights may go out, the power may go out. Number 4 is have a medical kit available. Again, you can pick these up at your local store. You can build them yourself. I would advise to go beyond just a basic medical kit. Have something like a tourniquet. The reason I bring that up is because you want to go from a basic kit to an extreme, situation, or be prepared. And you may ask, why would I recommend something like a tourniquet? I've had a lot of comment sections in my videos where people talk about, just doing a daily routine job at their job, and someone gets cut or injured really bad, and having that tourniquet, having that medical, gear on hand was the difference between life and death. If again the grid goes down, if our infrastructure is impacted, and you can't get access to hospitals, or for whatever reason they're not available, you want to be able to treat some of the extreme cases. The third thing I would recommend, and is really easy to do, is just get fuel lined up. What do I mean by that? Well, it's not a bad idea to have a wood rack, if you can, behind your house or on your property. If you can't do that, if you can't, store enough or have enough space to store wood, something like propane. You can get the small 20-pound tanks at, your Home Depot or Lowe's. Having a couple of those, they store really well. They're a good fuel source. And having a small, grill on hand, like a Coleman grill, you can pick one up probably on Craigslist, plug it into the stove, and you're set. The reason I bring that up is because having a fuel source, having the ability to cook, again, if the power goes down, if the infrastructure is impacted by what's happening, you want to definitely make sure you have a way to take care of you and your family. And by the way, as I'm going through these points, I'll put links in the description section below to different videos where I've gone into depth on each one of these. The second item is having water, having a water backup and some kind of simple way to filter water. Again, it's not that expensive to go down to the store and buy the 1 gallon, the 2.5 gallons for $1 or so. If you had some of those stored in your pantry, had, in some cabinets under the beds, again, it would put you in a great position if anything, again, were to happen with our infrastructure. Not only that, having the ability to filter it. You can buy a cheap $20 mini Sawyer water filter through Amazon. I'll post a link to that in the description section below. Having that ability to process water if it comes down to it could be the difference between life and death. For 20 bucks, you can't go wrong. The number one thing I definitely encourage people to do is have, at a minimum, a 2-week emergency food supply. Again, I'll post a link in the description section, also in the cards, I think over this shoulder. I did a video a while back about how to build a 2 weeks food supply. It's not that difficult to do. And if you have water and a fuel source to be able to cook it all, you'll be set. In conclusion, am I worried that we're going to see this catastrophic event play out in the next few weeks or the next few months? Again, I'm getting a lot of people that are sending me emails and messages through my different social media platforms asking this question. Again, it's not something that I'm overly worried about, that it's just going to go nuts over the next few months. But, I could be wrong. I mean, if things get really, really bad with this administration, if this shutdown continues to escalate and the American people are no longer the priority over the parties winning this particular game of chicken, you and I will be the casualties of it. And I would rather be in a position where I have myself and my family prepared and taken care of. I would love to get your feedback in the comments section below, get your thoughts. Just again, post that in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, please click on the like button, share on social media, and as always, be safe out there.